Hello, good afternoon. This is Time with PIAC, where we discuss key issues related to the management and use of petroleum revenues in Ghana. Today, we put a spotlight on how petroleum revenues have been channeled to the government's budgets through the annual budget funding amount, ABFA. These revenues have been used for both capital projects as well as for goods and services. Some of the petroleum revenues have been used to construct schools, markets, roads, and other critical infrastructure across the country. We can also talk about government's flagship free senior high school policy and the Planting for Food and Jobs program as some of the beneficiaries of petroleum revenues. Let us not jump the gun. We'll get into the details of how these revenues have been expended shortly, and for us to also assess whether these expenditures align with provisions in the PRMA. Stay with us for another educative and insightful session. Remember, you can send me your questions and comments as the discussion progresses, and we'll respond to them in the comments. I'm your host, Jessica A. Champon. My guest today is not new to Time with PIAC. He's back again, and this time he's here to provide more insight into this subject. Mr. Isaac Jomna is the coordinator of PIAC, and I can assure you that when it comes to anything related to ABFA and its utilization, we call him the walking encyclopedia. Hello, Mr. Jomna. Good afternoon, and welcome to Time with PIAC.
Good afternoon, Jessica.
I'm sure the walking encyclopedia got you laughing there.
Yes, it really did. I'll modestly say probably I am a primary school textbook. Because this is intimidating for me. You will raise the expectations of our viewers. Let's see how it goes.
Sure, let's see how that goes. Once again, you're welcome to Time with PIAC, and we want to just start with today's conversation. We are talking about the annual budget funding amount, and primarily has to do with petroleum revenue. So if you can just educate our viewers on what petroleum revenues are and how they even accrue to the state.
All right, thank you. And it's a good opportunity once again to be with viewers and let them know more about the management and use of petroleum revenues in Ghana. As we know, the Petroleum Revenue Management Act has provisions on the collection, the allocation, the management, the use, the investment of petroleum revenues in Ghana. Now, Section 6 of the Act provides as follows, and with your permission, I will refer to the sources, what we call the sources of petroleum revenues, the revenue streams, or the sources of the gross receipts that go into the Petroleum Holding Fund. It provides as follows. The following shall constitute the gross receipts of the Petroleum Holding Fund. A. Royalties from oil and gas, additional oil entitlements, surface rentals, other receipts from any petroleum operations and from the sale or export of petroleum. B. Any amount received from direct or indirect participation of the government in petroleum operations. C. Corporate income taxes in cash from upstream and midstream petroleum companies. D. Any amount payable by the National Oil Company as corporate income tax. So actually GNPC is expected to make profits and then pay corporate income tax. Pay corporate income tax, royalty, dividends. So even dividends, the fact that government, being the owner of GNPC, is entitled to dividends from GNPC or any other amount due in accordance with the laws of Ghana. And then E, any amount received by government directly or indirectly from petroleum resources not covered by paragraphs A to D, including where applicable, capital gains tax derived from the sale of ownership of exploration, development, and production rights. So this provision covers the areas where government receives petroleum, let me say, the petroleum receipts are paid into the Petroleum Holding Fund. Over the years, it's been mainly four. We have the carried and participating interest, which the Act says when you sell crude oil or you export. We have the corporate income tax, which the international oil companies have been paying. We have the royalty. Then we have surface rental, which is not so big. Then of late, we have been getting the interest on the Petroleum Holding Fund. And then, of course, the interest on the Ghana Civilization Fund and the Ghana Heritage Fund, but those have not been as available. So mainly, these have been the sources of government's petroleum revenue that go into the Petroleum Holding Fund, which sits at the Bank of Ghana.
Okay, so when these revenues accrue to the states, do we have a particular place that it goes to, and how is the allocation done?
Okay, so the Act provides that when the Petroleum Holding Fund has received all these, the revenue from all these sources, the Act provides that the carried and participating interest revenue streams, the National Oil Company, for now, the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, should be paid not more than 55% of it. The Act provides that periodically Parliament shall approve this, the exact percentage. So as we speak, it is about 30% of the carried and participating interest. So GMPC is giving, let's for now, 30% of the carried and participating interest for both government's share of equity and then what goes to GMPC as an institution. Then when we have done that, what remains? So currently 70% of the carried and participating interest is added to the other revenue streams I referred to in my earlier submission to constitute a new 100%, which the Act calls the benchmark revenue. So this 100%, the Act provides that not more than 70% of that should be spent in the budget every financial year. And that amount of petroleum revenue spent in the budget every financial year is what the Act calls the annual budget funding amount, which is shortened as ABFA. Some call it APFA, but you are referring to essentially the same thing.
Primarily, our conversation today is going to be focused on the utilization of petroleum revenues through the annual budget funding amount, ABFA. So when we talk about ABFA, what exactly is it when it comes to petroleum revenue management?
All right, thank you. So it looks like I went ahead of myself. So in every fiscal year, every financial year, the portion of petroleum revenue accruing to government that ends up being spent in the national budget after it has been approved by Parliament is what we call the annual budget funding amount, or ABFA or APFA. So it is for the spending of the Ghanaians of today, not future generations. We are the beneficiaries and they are approved to be spent. So the Act provides that this ABFA, when the Minister for Finance presents the budget for the following year, the Minister gets approval from Parliament for the amount to be spent. And the amount is supposed to be published in the Gazette. The Act provides so. It's supposed to be published in the Gazette. Then afterwards, it is supposed to be spent quarterly. So it has to be broken down into 4 quarters, and then every quarter, 25% of the total amount is spent as a quarterly ABFA.
So if you are just joining us, this is Still Time with PIAC, and today we are talking about the use of the annual budget funding amount. My guest is Mr. Isaac Jamina, the coordinator of PIAC, who has just given us an introduction to what petroleum revenues are and what exactly the ABFA is. So moving on, Mr. Jamina, are there clear guidelines or provisions regarding the use and application of the ABFA?
Yes. The PRMA, as I said in my introduction, provides for the collection, the allocation, the management, the use, the investment of petroleum revenue. when you look at sections 18, 21, even 19 of Act 815, then in Act 893, which is the amended version of the Act, the Act provides comprehensively for how the ABFA should be used and principles that should guide its usage. Let's not forget that these provisions have been put there because petroleum is a finite resource. It is exhaustible, will run out one day. And so the spirit and as well as the letter of the act to the effect that because this will run out one day, we need to spend them in a particular way, in a targeted way. Because then someone will ask, are they not all government revenue? Yeah. Why are we talking about this so much as though they were different from other? They are different. This is a finite, exhaustible resource, and so its use have principles that would guide it. The Act provides that in the first place, the utilization of ABFA shall be aligned with a medium-term expenditure framework that is aligned with a long-term national development plan approved by Parliament. So it is not supposed to be spent over short-term plans. There should be a long-term national development plan approved by Parliament, and that should be the primary guideline for the utilization of the revenue. Then the Act also provides that the ABFA should be utilized to develop all the regions of Ghana. At the time the Act came into force, there were 10 regions. Now we have 16 regions. So there should be balanced development of all the regions. So regions that are less endowed should equitably benefit. Regions that are more developed should also get their fair share of the petroleum revenue. The Act provides that it should maximize economic opportunity for all citizens. So it should be utilized to incentivize the economy such that it will create opportunities for the citizens of Ghana to benefit beyond just the resource and its revenue. So it should be used to develop other sectors of the economy such that then we create other sectors to benefit the economy in general. So these are some of the principles. Then the principle that not less than 70% of the annual budget funding amount should be spent on public investment expenditure. So it should be spent to sponsor or to fund projects that will last, that will go beyond one financial year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years, 15 years, so that when citizens who are born much later come and they question what the tangible benefits of petroleum revenue are, then we will be able to point to Project A, Project B, Project C, Program A, Program B, to them and say, when we had petroleum revenue, this and that are what we got or we were able to do with it. So there are a whole lot of principles that guide the usage of the ABFA.
Moving on, Mr. Drumna, I know that when we talk about ABFA, one key thing that stands out over the last 10 or 12 years is priority areas. We keep hearing about priority areas. Can you tell us what the priority area is when it comes to the use of the ABFA?
All right, thank you. So as I said earlier, the default position, the primary position of the Act is that petroleum revenue spent in the budget shall be guided by a long-term national development plan approved by Parliament. However, the Act also provides that in the absence of a long-term national development plan, the Minister for Finance of the day shall select out of a list in the Act, where I think the list is 12. The Act provides that the minister shall select not more than 4 of the areas in the Act over a 3-year period. So every 3 years, the minister selects for approval by Parliament of the priority areas, not more than 4. So the minister can select 1 priority area. The minister can select 2. The minister can select 3. but the minister cannot select more than 4. The maximum is 4. And so since 2011, when the act came into force, the ministers of finance have been selecting priority areas because Ghana still doesn't have a long-term national development plan approved by parliament. So we had 2011 to 2013, 2014 to 2016, 2017 to 2019, 2020 to 2022, and currently we have the 2023 to 2025. So that have been the terms for the selection of the priority areas for the utilization of the petroleum revenue in the budget.
This is still Time with PIAC, and today we are talking about the use of the ABFA, that is the portion of petroleum revenues that are channeled to the government's budget. And Mr. Jamla just walked us through a whole lot with regards to the ABFA. So we are moving into some further detail at this point, and we'd like Mr. Jamla to walk us through how the ABFA has been used from 2011 to 2023.
All right, thank you. So as I was saying earlier, the priority areas that have been selected by the ministers of finance since 2011. Let me add this caveat in the act. The act also provides that the areas for the spending of the petroleum revenues in the budget should not be limited to the 12 areas listed in the act. So it means that the act gives a window for expenditure besides the 12 listed. So from 2011 to 2013, the Minister for Finance selected these priority areas for the spending of the ABFA. Agricultural modernization, amortization of loans, road and other infrastructure, then capacity building. So these were the 4 areas selected by the Minister for Finance in the first term for the selection of the priority areas. The Act provides that when the term ends, a review of the performance of the priority areas should be done by the Minister of Finance, and based on that, new areas should be proposed to Parliament for approval. The Minister retained the priority areas in the first term. So from the years 2014, 15, 16, we had the following as the priority areas: agriculture modernization, amortization of loans, capacity building, and then road and other infrastructure. The total amount of money spent over the 6 years, the 2 priority area terms, was 3.31 billion Ghana cedis. And so that is what was spent over the 6-year period. The agric modernization received 238.68 million Ghana cedis. The amortization of loans, 874 million Ghana cedis. Road and other infrastructure, 1.5 billion Ghana cedis. Capacity building, 358 million Ghana cedis. So this is how the 3.3 billion Ghana cedis ABFA was spent over the 6-year period, the 2 terms for the priority areas selected. So 2017 to 2019, so it was just coincidental that in 2017 there was a new government and new priority areas had to be selected. I mean to stress this because it is not automatic that a new government has to select new priority areas. We're going to have a test of this in the year 2025 because we are running an election in 2024, but the priority areas will actually end in December 2025. And the Minister for Finance is required to retain the priority areas selected over the 2023-2025 and then effect any change if need be from the period 2026 to 2028. So 2017-2019, the government, new government, which is the current government, selected the following: agric, road, rail, and other critical infrastructure, physical infrastructure and service delivery in education, and then physical infrastructure and service delivery in health. So these are the priority areas selected by government. Let me say that PIAC, by the amendment in Act 893, is also to receive a portion of ABFA for its programs. And so PIAC also receives a portion, but because PIAC is not a priority area, we won't lump it under the priority area. So for this 3-year period, 2017, 18, 19, the total ABFA was 2.43 billion Ghana cedis. And this is how the priority areas benefited from the total amount. 246 million Ghana cedis to agric, 876 million Ghana cedis for road, rail, and other critical infrastructure, 1.1 billion Ghana cedis for physical infrastructure and service delivery in education, and then 77 million Ghana cedis for physical infrastructure and service delivery in health. Over the 3-year period, PIAC received 7.78 million Ghana cedis. So this is how the 2.43 billion was spent over the 3-year period. Then we have the 2020, 2021, 2022. The total ABFA spent was 9 billion Ghana cedis, 9 billion. So if you look at the trend, we are getting, yes, we are increasing, because over the first 6 years, it was 3.3 billion.
Yes.
Just the next 3 years, it was 2.43 billion. The next 3 years is 9 billion. So it is going up. Agric, so let me say that the Minister for Finance for the period 2020 to 2022 maintained the priority areas selected for 2017 to 19. It looks like he just followed his predecessor. So the agric received 184 million Ghana cedis. Road, rail, and other critical infrastructure received 5.3 billion Ghana cedis. Now, one change, but just a slight change, that the Minister for Finance made in this regime was that the priority areas for health and education were merged. So we have physical infrastructure and service delivery in education and health. And the total ABFA received was 2.3 billion Ghana cedis. And industrialization was the 4th priority area that was introduced in 2020-2022 term. It received a total of 57 million Ghana cedis. Let's add that in the year 2019, the Supreme Court of Ghana made a decision that in calculating the 5% of total government revenue that should be allocated to the District Assembly Common Fund, the ABFA should be considered as part of government revenue. So it's meant that 5% of the ABFA has to be taken and given to the District Assembly Common Fund for allocation to the MMDEs. So the Metropolitan Municipal District and Assemblies have to be given that. So for the period 2020 to 2022, the amount that went to the District Assembly Common Fund was 137.6 million Ghana cedis. Let someone not misunderstand me. Whatever amount of ABFA that goes to the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, the Ministry of Finance has been classifying it under one of the priority areas. So the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund is not a priority area. Every expenditure of GIF is under usually the road, rail, and other critical infrastructure. So this is how it's been spent. I'm sure we'll come and update citizens when the 2023 to 25 period ends.
Okay, but currently, what are the priority areas for 2023? Do we still have agric?
Yes, so we still have agric. We still have road, rail, and other critical infrastructure, but agric now has fisheries added. I guess government has done that just to place on record that in the focus on agric, equal attention should be given to fisheries. Now, government retained physical infrastructure and service delivery in education and health, and then also industrialization. So principally, I would say to a very large extent, the priority areas were maintained, yes, for the period 2023 to 2025.
That's quite insightful, but I'm just curious. We've seen agric run through from 2011 to 2023 because it's still part of the priority areas, what are some specific things that have been done with petroleum revenues when it comes to agri?
When you look at the earlier years, 2011 to 2016, government used the allocation, the disbursement to the agri priority area for the supply of seedlings for to fight on pests that invaded some farms then for subsidy, agricultural subsidy, and things like that. Now, for the period 2017 to current, government has embarked on the program it calls Planting for Food and Jobs. So a lot of the ABFA spent on the agri priority area has gone to the Planting for Food and Jobs. But let's also mention some other related expenditures. The Anomabo Fisheries College is one such institution that has received ABFA under the agri priority area. Like I said, it is agri including fisheries, and this particular project has been receiving petroleum revenue since 2011. So under agri, these are what we can point to. The main ones. There are some other small ones, but these are the main ones. The supply of seedlings and the others also still continue.
Indeed, we will limit ourselves to the main ones. So when we come to road, rural, and other critical infrastructure, is there one key project that we can point to?
It is difficult because usually, and that has been one of the challenges. I'm sure the discussion will get there, so I will hold my horses for now. But let me mention about 30 million US dollars that was invested in the Kotoka Terminal 3 edifice, which was a commercial investment made by the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. It is gratifying to see the returns that have been made on that particular project. I think the last time GIF reported to PIAC, more than 7 million Ghana cedis had been made on that investment. And this is the kind of investment the citizens of Ghana are expecting petroleum revenues to be put into, so that not only just the infrastructure, but also the returns on the investment made. A lot of road projects, Accra to Kumasi, Enchi Asankregwa Road, a lot of them, even the the Spintex Road flyover, flower pot we call it, a number of roads have received the Enchi Asankregwa Road. I think I mentioned it. The Axim Coastal Protection Project, the Kojo Krom Takwa Railway, a lot of these projects have received petroleum revenue funding and more. And even small projects too. Sometimes resealing, regraveling, redesign of road projects, asphalt, overlay, a whole lot. I think last year, PIAC inspected some projects in the Bema Camp area, the Mats area. So a lot of projects.
Still on the use of the ABFA on priority areas, we've spoken about agriculture, we've touched on roads, rural, and other critical infrastructure. Can we delve now on education and health? What are some of the projects that we can talk about?
Okay, so before we do education and health, let's mention the Atuabo gas processing plant. We took a loan from the Chinese government, and that priority area called amortization of loans was used to more like repay the loan, Ghana's part. So the amount of about 800 million Ghana cedis of petroleum revenue is attributable to that project. So it can safely be called an ABFA funded project, the Atuabo gas processing plant. Now, coming to the education and health priority areas, and then now area. The free senior high school program falls under that priority area. A number of classroom blocks, dormitory science blocks have been built under this. the government's STEM program, some of them have been built from the under this priority area. Even though Agenda 1 is a health project, it is not under the health priority area. It is being executed by the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund with about 65% of petroleum revenue funding, but it is not under the health priority area. The health priority area has received, whatever it has received, has been used for CHIPS compound. Governments trying to eliminate hard files of patient records, trying to digitalize it. I think that is one. Then essentially CHIPS compounds and some clinics that have received petroleum revenue funding. So if you look at the health priority area, not much has been spent there. But the two put together, education and health, have received quite a chunk. And it's essentially the education priority area that has received the tuition, the feeding, and then the everything about the free senior high school program. About 60% of it is funded from petroleum revenue.
Mr. Jumla, we know that PIAC has been inspecting some of these projects that have received funding from the ABF as part of your operations. What has been some of your findings, and do you think that we are really getting value for money by using the ABFA on these things?
Yes, it is true that PIAC inspects ABFA funded projects, and the committee will continue with this inspection. We started as far back as 2016, and we will continue to do so. The only thing is that the committee will have to increase the number of ABFA funded projects it inspects, because there are many projects. In fact, in a year, you can get about 2,000 projects and programs, 2,500, even 3,000. We have had in 2020, we about 4,000 projects and programs of government that received petroleum revenue funding. So we would say, yes, it's funding government programs, but there have been challenges where sometimes you visit the project and the project has stalled. The ABFA component has been paid to the contractor, but the other part that is to come for the contractor to be able to continue working is not coming. Contractor has left site, and whatever has been done has been left at the mercy of the weather. Sometimes the ABFA is used to pay arrears on a project, and so even though there has been a disbursement, when you go to the ground, you don't see anything happening there, and then citizens sometimes feel the funds have not been utilized well and all that. There are these challenges, co-mingling of funds, poultry allocation, and things like that. In terms of value for money, personally, I would say, but I believe that it is in line with PIAC's view, we can do better as a nation. We can put the resources to better use in terms of national legacy projects that will last and stand the test of time for citizens to be able to point to. Now, if you ask any citizen walking the streets of Ghana what to mention about 3 national legacy projects completely funded from petroleum revenue, I'm sure that the average Ghanaian will struggle to give you an answer. Not that they think that the petroleum revenues are being spent privately, but the way it is being spent, it is not being used to fund projects completely. So we cannot attribute a project to petroleum revenue completely.
So we see that it's more like a blend. The revenues are being used for something positive, but still there are concerns. So as PIAC and as a statutory body with oversight responsibility of the management and use of petroleum revenues in Ghana, have you raised these concerns, and what has been the feedback from the duty bearers?
Yes, so the committee has a reporting mandate. So where the committee has been raising these issues in its statutory reports, the semi-annual reports, the annual reports. Every year, the committee meets the Parliament of Ghana and presents highlights of these reports to Parliament. And the expectation is that Parliament, being the body with constitutional oversight of the usage of all revenue funds in Ghana, will move the next step forward and ensure that ministries, departments, and agencies of government will act in accordance with the provisions of the PRMA and bring about a more prudent, more efficient utilization of the revenue. That has been the expectation of the committee. The committee was expecting that not only Parliament, but the executive, the presidency, will lead in this charge, will ensure that the Ministry of Finance, all the ministry departments and agencies that receive petroleum revenue in its programs will utilize them in such a way that Ghanaians will be able to attest that since we started the production of petroleum in Ghana, December 2010, and we started receiving revenue in 2011, we can point to about 10, 15, 20 national legacy projects that have been completely funded from petroleum revenue so that we can lay claim to them. But as we speak, we are yet to get there. And it's the reason PIAC is of the view that there's more room for improvement in the management and utilization of petroleum revenues in Ghana.
Recently, we've seen PIAC make several calls for the need for a long-term national development plan to guide the spending of the ABFA. Do you think that would solve all the problems we have with regards to the ABFA expenditure?
Not at all. It will not solve all the problems, but it will lead to a shift in paradigm. I say so because if the long-term national development plan has it that for the next 5 years we are eliminating schools under trees, then petroleum revenue will be channeled towards the building of classroom blocks in all parts of the country. So by the time we get to the next, let me say, 5 years, we can look back and say we set ourselves the target of eliminating schools under trees. It required building 1,500 classroom blocks. How many have we been able to build with petroleum revenue, with taxes, with loans, and with grants, so that we'll be able to assess ourselves with that target? But when we have just the medium-term party manifesto agenda and things like that leading the charge, it makes it difficult. Then it becomes, over the next 4 years, what I was able to do against what you were able to do, and that kind of debate, which in the end doesn't lead to the benefits of the Ghanaian. It becomes more of a contest between the political parties who are contesting to run the election. So the enactment of a long-term national development plan approved by Parliament will really set the tone, will define the more like the path for us to better use petroleum revenue than the way we are using it now, just selecting priority areas. Even if a long-term national development plan is encapsulated in an act of Parliament, there's still priority area to be selected, but then you do so in alignment with the long-term national development. So it is not in isolation. You're not just looking at your medium term, your party manifesto. You are looking at how that links up with the long-term national development plan.
Mr. Jomna, as we get ready to bring the conversation to an end, I just want to go back to the Petroleum Revenue Management Act and what it says that the ABFA should do, and then I'll ask you whether we have really seen that since 2011. So according to the law, the ABFA has to lead to maximization of the rates of economic development. It has to promote equality of economic opportunity with a view to ensure the well-being of citizens. And it will also lead to an even and balanced development of the regions. Since 2011, have we been able to do this with the use of the ABFA?
I won't say yes to this. And my answer, and it is the position of PIAC, that if you look at how we have utilized petroleum revenue over the period, add 3.3 billion to 2.4 billion to 9 billion, you will be getting close to 20 billion. It is clear that 20 billion over 2011 to 2022, that is 11 years. So on the average, 20 billion over 11 years, you are talking about around 1.7 billion every year. That is not a small amount at all. Governments, and it is the reason there is need for long-term national development plan. You're looking at the peculiar needs of each of the regions, because it talks about balanced development of the regions.
Yeah.
So if it is Upper West region, what is needed there to enhance the life and the well-being of the people? Let the long-term national development plan bring these to the fore, and let us utilize the petroleum revenue. Then also let me mention that all in all, let's conclude and say that there is more room for improvement across all the governments. I won't single out 11 to 16 or 17 to 22. Let us improve as a people so that the resource will be of benefit to us all, both now and in the future.
So indeed, let us improve on how we are using the resource so that it can benefit both the current and future generations. So this has been Time with PIAC, and we looked at the use of the annual budget funding amounts, that is the use of petroleum revenues through government's budget for projects. My guest was Mr. Isaac Jamna, the coordinator of PIAC, and in my introduction, I stated that when it comes to the use of the ABFA, he's a working encyclopedia, and he wanted to be known as a primary school dictionary. But I'm sure after listening and watching him over the last few minutes, you are convinced and you agree to my assertion. And as always, PIAC remains open to further discussion when it comes to anything related to petroleum revenue management. If you would also want to see how the ABFA has been used, you can always head to our website, www.piacghana.org, and download any of our statutory reports, and you would see the list of all the ABFA projects from 2011 to 2023. Thank you very much, Mr. Jamna, for making time to join us on Time with PIAC. And to you, our audience, special thanks to the production team. Until we come your way again with another edition of Time with PIAC, let's keep the conversation going. You can send us a WhatsApp message on 055-441-6544. I'm your host, Jessica Echampon. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.